Hi class, so today we're going to be going over a brief introduction of piecewise functions. So let's discuss what a piecewise function is. So a piecewise function is made up of two or more functions, each with their own domain. So what we have here is we have our overall function, right? So this guy here, this is our overall. Now these are the pieces that make our overall. And these parts are the domain, the respective domain. So if we read this here, like we look at the red part, it says x squared minus 1 if x is less than -2. So when we look at this graph here, we know that anything with x squared is going to be parabolic, right? And we're coming in from all values that are less than -2. So we're coming in from negative infinity all the way to -2. Okay, and there's actually going to be a hole there because we don't include it. All right, now for this blue part here, this 5x plus 3 if x is greater than or equal to -2, this line is linear, and we're talking about for all x values that start at start at -2 and continue on to infinity. So there's two different parts, and we're separated by the domain. Okay. So you will be given in the upcoming lesson, like to solve for specific input values. When you're given a specific input value, you want to see what that output value is, right? Nothing that you guys haven't already done. But it does depend on what that value is. So let's look at this first problem. It says f of -5. So if you look at step 1 here on how to solve these, we'll go over in class more in detail as the steps to graph, but in order to solve, you want to identify your input value. So our input value is -5. In other words, x equals -5. Okay? So we get this -5 value. Now where do we put it in, right? Do we put it in this top one? Do we put it in the bottom one? How do we know? Well, we need to look at the domains. So let's look at this first domain here where it says x is less than -2. So we need to just think about this here. Is x equals -5? Are we less than -2? And I'm going to say we are. So then we're going to use this first equation. We would say f of -5 equals, and in parentheses, -5 squared minus 1. So f of -5 is equal to -5 squared is positive 25 minus 1. So f of -5 is 24. Okay? Let's look at the next question here. So the next one is -2. X equals -2. So let's go over the steps. So we identify the input value. Then we need to identify which domain. So when I look at the domains, well, we have x is less than -2. And so let's think about this -2 value. Is -2 less than -2? No, we know that they're equal, right? So let's look at the next domain. It says x is greater than or equal to -2. So we're going to use what's in respective to this. So then we'd have to say f of -2 is equal to 5 times -2 plus 3. Well, f of -2 is equal to 5 times -2 is -10 plus 3. So f of -2 is equal to -7. Okay. Let's do another one. We've got, first step, identify the input value. So we're saying x equals 7. Well, where does 7 fall? Is 7 less than -2? No. Is 7 greater than or equal to -2? It's greater than. So we're going to say x is greater than or equal to -2. So we'll say f of 7 is equal to 5 times 7 plus 3. So f of 7 is equal to 35 plus 3. Okay, so we'll write this up here. We'll say f of 7 is equal to 38. So again, we have these three steps. We want to make sure that we identify what our input value is, identify what domain that input value falls under, and then use the respective function. Okay. So let's go on to another set of examples and get some more practice in. So for these problems here, wow, this is interesting. This is still a piecewise function. This is our whole function, right? Here are our pieces, and here is our domain. Okay, the only difference now is instead of having 2 pieces, we have 3, but the rules are still the same. Okay, to solve, the rules are still the same. So let's look at this, g of 2. All right, so we're going to identify the input value. So we're going to say g equals 2. So let's see where that falls. Okay, let's see where that falls. It says x is less than or equal to -4. Well, 2 is not less than -4, so we can't do this first equation. Let's look at the second equation at the domain. It says -4 is less than x, which is less than 1. So we're talking about numbers that are between -4 and 1. Is 2 between -4 and 1? No, it's not. Okay, let's check the last domain. X is greater than or equal to 1. Well, 2 is greater than or equal to 1. So we're going to identify it as this domain. X is greater than or equal to 1. So then we would say g of 2 is equal to 2 to the third plus 9. Okay, so g of the 2 equals 2 times 2 to the third is 2 times 2 times 2. So 2 times 2 is 4 times 2 is 8 plus 9. So g of 2 equals 2 times 8 is 16 plus 9. G of 2 equals 16 plus 9 is 25. All right, well, let's go over the next one and let's go through our steps. So for this next one, we see g of -1. So our input value, g equals -1. Well, where does -1 fall? Okay, so -1, x is less than or equal to -4. Well, -1 is not less than -4, right? So be careful with those negatives. It's actually greater than. So we can't use the first equation. Let's look at the second set of domain. -4 to 1. Is -1 between -4 and 1? We're going to say yes, it is. So our domain here, -4 to 1. So we can say g of -1 is equal to -1 minus 1. So g of -1 is equal to negative times negative is +1 minus 1. So g of -1 is equal to 0. All right, let's do one more together. So we're going to identify this input value of g's, well, the function of g when x is, and I apologize, I'm saying g equals, these should all really be x equals here, guys. Sorry about that. X equals -6. So when x equals -6, let's think about this input value. Is -6 less than, we're looking at the first function, our first piece actually, is x less than -4? And yes, it is. So we're going to say x is less than or equal to -4. So we can substitute in there. We'll say g of -6 is equal to 1/2 -6 plus 3. And we'll continue our work up here just to create more space. So we'll say g of Negative 6 equals 1/2 times negative 6 is negative 3 plus 3. So g of negative 6 is equal to negative 3 plus 3 is 0. Alright class, so to summarize what we've just done here, you want to make sure that you identify what your input value. What is your x value? Once you know what your x value is, what you're inputting, you want to make sure that you identify which domain that input falls into. Okay? So you look at the domains first. Once you know what those domains are, then you solve for the respective function. Okay? We'll definitely get more practice in these in class. Be ready for that. Please make sure that you complete the homework that aligns to this video, and we will see you all later. Thank you guys.